Why should people care about herbicides being used in forestry?
I'm going to say that I've had death threats. I've had some pretty intimidating phone calls.
If you build on people's suspicions or fears by doing things, even though you're doing it to be transparent, it just heightens that concern even more.
People forget when they stand in a stand of timber today and stand there and look how beautiful it is, all the steps it took to get there.
I'm Todd Burgess. I'm the Executive Director of Forest Nova Scotia, and you are listening to Forestry Uncut. So what we're going to learn today, we're really going to dive into one of the tools to grow trees well and grow trees fast. We're going to dive into the use of herbicides in forestry, the benefits, the pros and cons, and sort of the twists and turns we have to take to actually use that tool effectively. Our first guest is Alex Feix. He is a silviculture contractor in Nova Scotia that uses herbicide applications as one of the treatments that he provides for woodlot owners in the province. Our second guest is Rick Archibald. He is the woodlands manager for Domtar, formerly Northern Pulp, and he has extensive knowledge in how to manage large areas of land effectively. So maybe we'll start with Rick. Rick, can you introduce yourself? Give us a little bit of history, like how long you've been in Nova Scotia, what you do.
I've been in Nova Scotia. I really was born out west in Alberta and moved here when I was 15, and I've been around here ever since. I have been working in the forestry for, I don't want to say exactly because it's a long time, but over 35 years. And I've been working, right today, I'm forestry manager for Domtar for Nova Scotia Woodlands.
Alex, how about yourself? Where do you come from? How did you land in Nova Scotia?
Well, I was originally actually born in Germany, came over when I was 8 months old, then landed in Nova Scotia and grew up here. Started in the forest industry started in the forestry industry getting a paycheck at 14. I've been around it all my life. Just turned 40, started, planting trees, running a brush saw, moving along, running equipment, managing operations, and actually Rick was my boss at one point.
So you're a silviculture contractor now. What drew you to being a contractor for the forestry sector in Nova Scotia? It's a pretty volatile industry. Why the heck would you be a contractor?
Well, in the past, I've worked in the West Coast, coastal BC, Alberta, Newfoundland, met my wife here, planted my roots, and I wanted to stay here. When Stephen McNeil gave me my marching orders by shutting down the pulp mill, my wife, I had my third child on the way, and I asked the wife, well, we could go to Alberta, BC, but no, the family roots are here. So I said, okay. And one day talking with someone there was a silviculture contractor that worked for the pulp mill. He was retiring, and I grabbed the reins there, took that on.
And what did you take on? His business?
His business. I got his crew and bought the equipment. I did it because I wanted to call Nova Scotia home, raise my family here. That's what I was really drawn to. Plus my diverse background, I branched out in the business, just not solely silviculture. It was consulting, forest management plans for people, basically a one-stop shop for woodlot owners. Year one, COVID hit. I thought, okay, how can it get any rougher? But then along the line, a friend of mine, a good colleague, he moved on in the forestry industry into government. He passed me the torch for the herbicide application program. And our running joke is when you pass the torch along, don't hand the flaming end to you.
But he did.
He did.
So in our discussions about forestry, we're talking about the high production forestry leg, but we're going to dive into the topic of herbicides, which is sort of a subset of pesticides. We're not going to talk about pesticides, but herbicides very specifically. So I'd like to get both Alex and Rick's thoughts on why herbicides, why is that such a challenge? Why should people care about herbicides being used in forestry in order to manage our woodlots?
The importance of using that tool is to ensure our seedling establishment. And then we have to remember where that money came from to put the trees in the ground too. It's not free money. It's coming out of a budget. And we want to ensure that investment is growing. So got to think about it like a bank account. We're investing in there and in the future to be able to harvest a merchantable product. Like again, we're trying to grow a forest that is long-lived, has tolerant species in it. We're not trying to grow biomass or low grade. We're trying to reduce that. And that tool early on is very valuable.
So the tool of herbicide is protecting the plantation investment. That's what I'm reading. Is that accurately summarize what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay. Why do we need to spray herbicide in the first place? Rick, do you have any thoughts? Why should we care?
Well, first of all, I do agree with Alex that it's a very important tool for the intensive or plantation management leg of the triad. There's nothing to replace it right today. And it's no different than people want us to move away from gas and diesel engines because of what they do. But the technology may not, it's evolving. So with us, we don't have the other technology today. We'll keep trying. But that intensive, if we can't use that tool, we cannot grow our high production plantations, intensive management. We'll have a bigger footprint across our land base, not a small footprint. And it may be to the point where the products that we need as a society are not available.
Right. So we won't have trees to build houses with.
Correct.
One thing, we'll step back again. Our government in Nova Scotia used to fund this treatment. And in the past, there was a lot more of it done. Hence, you weren't paying out of pocket. And, the government was funding it. Hence, when you look at New Brunswick, you look at their scale of what they're doing is, I can't even put a number. So let's say last year was 25,000 hectares in New Brunswick ballpark. Nova Scotia this year total would have been maybe 1,500 hectares. But again, we go, landowners are paying out of pocket. Why are they doing that? Is when you're putting your seedlings in.
When you're planting, replanting.
When you're tree planting, the steps leading up to tree planting is 2 growing seasons after harvest. So when you harvest the site, you do a regen assessment to see if the site actually needs to be planted. And the other reason too is there's hylobius, which is an insect that lives in the slash that could girdle the seedlings. So that's why we wait those 2 years. And then, so you can imagine the site 2 years after, we have a lot of competition with the grasses, raspberries, pin cherries, popple, what we call pioneer species. So you could have stuff that could be 1 meter, 3 feet, up to 2 meters, 6 feet of this jungle that we're putting this little tiny seedling in. It may be 8 inches tall. And the whole intents and purposes of this treatment is to remove that competition temporarily to allow that seedling to get established.
So we've heard this idea about land management. What exactly are we talking about? Land management, woodlot management, what does, to lay that out in simple terms, what are we talking about?
It's about managing, if you have a woodlot, you have a forest on it and trees on it, it's about managing it so that there can be continual growth. Trees don't just grow and die and emit carbon to the atmosphere, CO2 to the atmosphere. So it's about going in and getting the trees established, and then it's about nurturing them, no different than you do a garden. You thin them out, you make sure they stay healthy, and there's a time when they then need to be harvested or removed. When you take your garden away, we need to harvest those trees in different ways. So it's about managing the forest so it stays healthy. And a healthy forest is good for environment, protection against fire, climate change, everything.
Okay. If I was, let's just say I was opposed to herbicide, why not just let the pinch cherries and the aspens grow? Let the natural forest take over from where we've we've harvested trees. Why don't we let the natural forest come in? Why do we have to kill those natural trees?
Why? Because I don't know if we have pin cherry 2x4s.
Okay. All right. So we need those seedlings for 2x4s in the future.
Well, we go back to what Rick said, with the long list of things. We want to grow a long-lived species like forest. We actively manage to reduce the amount of, you would say, biomass or pulpwood or low-grade species. We're always trying to manage the forest for a long, what would you say, like a
shade-tolerant, high-quality, long-lived species.
Correct.
Is that what you're trying to? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And Todd, really when you're doing plantation or intensive forestry or high production as it's called, and I always say you look in balance, but when you're doing that, the whole idea is to grow that as fast as you can so that those products that we all use every day can be ready as quickly as possible. If you go the way of the natural selection way with the trees and early pioneer species, without getting too technical, you can be 60 to 80 years. With the high production intensive management and using the tools, and there's many tools about doing the right treatment at the right window, we can shorten that to 30 to 40 to 50 years. So we're taking a small amount of land and we're going to manage it intensively. And we have all these scientists, international scientists, they're federal, who are developing the regulations around what you need to do and how you do it.
Okay. So what do you do, Alex, then when it comes to herbicide? What's your role in the whole herbicide tool in the high production lag?
What I could say, what we do now is it's all on private land, even though in the Leahy report, it's recommended in the intensive leg. So all herbicide application, aerial application is done on private land, funded by the landowner, not by the government.
So the government doesn't supply any funding for herbicide, okay?
No, not like New Brunswick. New Brunswick, they fund it. But
okay.
The landowners will come to me with parcels that they want treated. So we have to go through a whole process. First, we look at, is it inside of a designated watershed, a municipal drinking watershed? Right away, we're not allowed to, but other users are allowed to treat that area inside the watershed.
But woodlot owners can't.
Woodlot owners can't. Agriculture or other things, they can. So then we go through another process is we put the buffers on all these things. So you have wetlands, they have a buffer, watercourses have a larger buffer. So in harvesting, we use a 20-meter buffer, but when it comes to the herbicide applications, 30-meter buffer. Then also we use a 100-meter buffer on dwellings. So that's our buffering process, plus there's a buffer on boundary lines. But then we also have another set of regulations we follow. So we get all this together, give this permit application to the Department of Environment, and then there's a fee associated with it, which is non-refundable. And 30 days prior to doing any work, we need to have our signs posted, which are bilingual now, at every entry point. Also, every dwelling within 500 meters of the treatment area has to be notified. Also, 20 days prior, we need to have a newspaper ad.
So it sounds challenging and bureaucratic and hard to do, Alex. If the science is there that says it's safe and we use it as in a tool in the high production, but it's still so difficult, is there things that we can do to make it easier for forest companies and contractors like yourself to actually do some of this work?
Just to be equal as agriculture. Same things they do, we should be the same. But this year, the big change, which was very helpful, was the removal of the PIDs from our permit being publicly displayed.
Okay, so some of our listeners may not know what a PID is. So what is a PID?
Your property ID. So you can go online, look it up, property ID, and then boom, it'll take you right to that parcel. And that being removed was beneficial because everyone within 500 meters of that treatment zone already has been notified. And there's 2 signs at every entry point. So why do we need to go above and beyond? All that led into was people coming and setting up camps and protesting, and landowners not getting their areas treated that they had planned on getting treated. And
their plantation, their investment in their plantation was then at risk.
That's right. That's right. And again, another risk would be some landowners lived on some of these properties, so possible conflict. I'm going to say that I've had death threats. I've had some pretty intimidating phone calls. Again, like people say, I've got thick skin, broad shoulders. It'd be easy to get frustrated if you didn't have the gumption to do this job. It's high stress already, You've got these people calling and wondering where these campsites are. That being removed takes a big stress off. You can move about your day focusing on other safety and environmental issues.
Okay, so I'm going to change direction on our conversation a little bit, Alex. This year, I happen to know that you weren't able to follow through with your herbicide treatments this year. What was the reason?
Oh, correct. The drought. So the drought, it wasn't because of the fires or what have you, or push from the people that opposed this. It was the drought. We've never seen a drought of this extent ever in Nova Scotia. And what was happening, the grasses were dying, the hardwood trees were starting to shut down. They were starting to look later in fall. So for this product to be effective, though, the vegetation needs to be living. So there wouldn't have been a real effect to control that vegetation, really. So the decision was made to cancel it. That being said, I've invested a lot of time and energy to get the signs out. Again, money for the permit, which is non-refundable. There's a lot of things when a lot of time and energy goes into a program like this, and not having a return is pretty bad.
Right. So, Rick, I don't know if Domtar had any harvest or any blocks that were planned to be sprayed this year or not.
We had a few small ones from tree improvement tests we were doing.
1 year. What kind of impact will that have forest management wise?
Well, it's going to delay things. As we said earlier, through the natural process, it'll happen, but you've got the investment here. And so it will be back on the slate for next year.
So let's back up. We've been doing lots of backups on this podcast. So let's back up just one more step and talk about how much glyphosate and herbicide we're actually talking about that forestry uses. So the example of all the glyphosate used in Nova Scotia, how much is used in forestry?
4%. And out of that 4%, look at the bigger pictures, 96% is used in other sectors such as agriculture and landscaping. A regular person can go to a hardware store, buy a jug of glyphosate called Roundup, and go about their day. There's no permitting. There's no licensing. They don't need an applicator's license to go purchase this.
Okay, so you're obviously an applicator?
Yes, I'm a licensed applicator.
A licensed applicator. So what is forestry doing that attracts all this attention? Why is there so much attention to forestry?
It's through the whole permitting process that we have the rules and regulations we need to abide to, where Department of Environment puts our permit public where nobody else has that. Give you an example, Nova Scotia Power has a blanket permit because they only use it on their right-of-ways. So they know exactly every year what that right-of-way is, but it may move on that right-of-way. Where in forestry, we don't have that obligation. We have a moving areas every year. I can't tell you in 3 years where I'll be because someone will harvest a site and make a plan along the way that site needs to be planted and then treat it with herbicide.
Okay.
Big picture, we are applying the glyphosate. Probably in the province, less than 20% gets glyphosate, much less, probably under 10%.
Of what? The land?
Of the land, of the forest land.
Yeah, okay.
Okay? And it's applied once every 40, 50, 60 years. And it's applied at a rate of about, 2, 3, 4 liters per hectare?
Yeah, it's 4 liters of product mixed with 36 liters of water, upwards to 40 liters of water.
So
you picture a liter of milk or 2 liters of milk, right, over a hectare, which is what? A hectare is how many building lots?
Right?
2.5 acres.
Yeah,
right? So
a
you're
hectare's
talking
2.5
5
acres.
building lots if they're a half acre, or if it's in the city of Halifax, that's probably 10 building lots.
Right. So it's not a lot of product. It's not over a lot of area of land. How do we bring things into perspective?
I think sometimes we want to be so transparent. Folks have that impression that it's dangerous. Then we come along and you got to post. You got to put it in the newspaper. You got to do all these things that just heightens that concern even more. And we look at other sectors, they don't do that, and there's not a bit of concern about it. So I wonder sometimes, not that we're trying to hide something, but if you build on people's suspicions or fears by doing things, even though you're doing it to be transparent,
What would you say?
be driving this to make it worse.
So, Alex, I know you've had some experiences last year with some protesters on some of your blocks, on some of your treatment areas. Can you tell us a little bit about your interaction with them last year?
Last year was a very interesting year. It was down Allen Hill. There was a very large group of concerned citizens there. I had the RCMP involved was the first step to remove them from the site, but it was a quite large site. And
So it was on private land then?
yes, it was on private land. There was no trespassing signs on the entrance points. They ignored that, approached them with the RCMP, asked them to remove themselves. At one point, they must have reached out, and we had a large group of people there, and turned out to have a really good discussion, and then helped them get their belongings off the land. We returned a few days later with the helicopters, and what happened was 4 o'clock in the morning, my road blocker phones me and lets me know that there's people in tents on the site again. So we eventually made our way there. I got up in the helicopter with the pilot and went down, checked the site. Sure enough, they had removed themselves from the main roads and were hiding within the blocks. The RCMP had informed me that. Again, I called the RCMP later in the morning. They came out, tried to remove them. Again, these people disappeared into the woods where he couldn't see them or find them. And when we flew over with the helicopter, we found them. But then, so that being said, we packed up for the day, trying to leave. And then they blocked the road for us to leave. And a little bit of discussion, they parted the ways and let the crew leave. But I stayed behind and started to have a discussion with them. And one thing led to another. I said, maybe we should have a field day where you guys come out and spend a day in the woods with the few people from the industry and look at some things. And they took me up on the offer.
I was there with you on that day, Alex.
That was the day we followed up after. We had to go down and visit.
I think I brought donuts the day I came out.
So yeah, then we went back to meet them the preliminary meeting before we had
okay.
the field day. So we met them that day, again, on Allen Hill. They had their stuff. Remember, we took them down the road there, and we took them into that little stand that was intensively managed, you would say. It was PCT'd. We stood in there. And then that day, we went through all the sites. First, we started with, was a site that was harvested and had been planted, but had a lot of that pioneer species in there. And then we had the discussions on what you would do on this site, And that's when the one lady brought up the comment that because of herbicide application, we have no moose in Nova Scotia. But that's...
I don't remember that comment, but keep going.
But I paused for a moment, and that's the year that Cape Breton decided to stop the moose hunt. And herbicide hasn't been used there in almost 2 decades.
Hasn't been used in 2 decades in Cape Breton.
In forestry applications.
Okay.
But they've stopped the moose hunt, so I don't think there's a correlation there.
Right.
I'm not a scientist or biologist, but that statement there. And as the day we went on, we went to a few other sites. I remember the one site where it was harvested, planted, then it was sprayed, and then just 2 years ago, prior to our visiting, had a manual weeding. The plantation, like the seedlings, were well above the competition, and the question was asked to them, would you call this a diverse site? When you look across the landscape, there were some hardwoods there. There was all kinds of wildflowers, not that nuclear landscape that these people had envisioned. And you're looking across and they see why we did it, but still in a young stage, right? But it really hit home, I think, later on when we got to that site that was harvested, planted, sprayed, pre-commercially thinned, 1 commercial thinning, and that was the second commercial thinning. So that was second entry commercial thinning on that site where it was that moss-like ground underneath. Looked like a park.
It did look like a park.
And we had the one lady say how beautiful it was. You wanted to say, well, does intensive forestry look beautiful?
And I've seen that too, where you go into a managed plantation that's 35, 40 years old, and they walk in and they just feel it overcome them how beautiful it is, right? Not realizing how it all started. And there's the chanterelle mushrooms and there's all this. And so many times when I've taken them to show them what a conservation forest, a matrix forest, and a plantation looks like, most people mix up the ecological, thinking it's messy, with the plantation and thinking it's so beautiful when it gets older.
Right. So some of our most intensive forestry operations actually look most park-like.
People forget all the steps we've done to get to the stands we stand in today, whether it be 40, 60 years down the road. Some of the people maybe have passed or long gone that did the treatments. The person that put the trees in the ground, the person, People forget when they stand in a stand of timber today and stand there and look how beautiful it is, all the steps it took to get there.
If you're listening to the podcast, I'd like to thank you for tuning in. We would love for you to subscribe, like, and share it with people that maybe you know or other people in the sector. If you want to learn more about Forest Nova Scotia, the organization that I work for, you can go to forestns.ca. That's our website. You can click on there, listen to our podcast, and find out more information about forestry and the forest sector in Nova Scotia.